At 5:46 in the morning, under a low ceiling of fog rolling across the French bocage, an entire Allied corps, 38,412 men, 612 tanks, 1,184 trucks, and 3 artillery battalions, was marching straight into what German planners had designated Kill Zone Delta. The valley was only 1.2 miles wide and perfectly shaped for a converging ambush. None of the men and none of their commanders realized that on the ridge above them, hidden behind the beams of a half-collapsed barn, a 17-year-old farm girl was listening to a tiny anomaly. That anomaly in a German radio transmission was so small that every trained operator before her dismissed it as atmospheric noise. But the silent gap, 0.88 seconds longer than normal, would become the key to one of the most improbable rescues in the European theater. The only reason anyone noticed it at all was because the girl had spent 4 years repairing fence wire radios on her family farm. At 05:47, German panzer elements moved into their attack lanes. At 05:49, 172 artillery pieces stood loaded and ready. 88s, 105s, and naval veteran batteries were dialed into pre-registered coordinates covering every foot of the valley floor. Once Allied units crossed the midpoint, the Germans would unleash a storm of fire that analysts later estimated would kill 18,000 men in 60 minutes. Fog had grounded Allied reconnaissance aircraft. Frontline commanders believed the valley was clear. No one suspected that the low-priority German radio traffic recorded the previous night held the single warning that could stop a massacre. But 12 meters away, inside a wooden shed serving as a backup radio post, the girl, believed by everyone to be just a helpful volunteer, leaned over her headphones and frowned. She had heard German Morse operators for months. Every pattern, every rhythm. This signal was wrong, not broken, wrong. The silent gap between characters was longer by less than a second, but she recognized it instantly. Enemy units changed gap intervals only during encrypted movement orders. She checked her stopwatch. The gap was 8 ticks too long. She replayed the tape, same result. She didn't know what the encrypted message said, but she knew the pattern meant major unit repositioning. A careless operator might miss it. A tired one would miss it. A 17-year-old farm girl with an abnormal ear would not. Outside, trucks were warming up. Inside headquarters, officers prepared to advance. Her report sat on a desk where 3 people had already ignored it. They assumed humidity interference. But she knew what humidity sounded like. She'd grown up listening to scrap-built radios. She could hear a storm coming 3 minutes before the first lightning. She could tell when a chicken walked across a barn roof based solely on the vibration it made through the rafters. And now she heard something in the German transmission that made every instinct scream. An ambush was ahead. As the clock hit 06:02, the lead battalion of the Allied column approached the valley mouth. The girl rewound the tape again, replaying sections, listening for the faint metallic ring in the signal harmonics. That ring only appeared when Germans transmitted from mobile armored units powered by Maybach engines. Stationary ground stations had a lower frequency hum. What she heard was the Maybach signature multiplied several times, meaning tanks, not a patrol, not a screen. Multiple armored companies moving in coordinated formation. She grabbed the field mic. Regulations forbade volunteers from transmitting priority alerts. A violation meant immediate removal and formal reprimand. Her hand shook for half a second, then steadied. She pressed the key. The warning message she sent lasted 11 seconds, exactly 31 characters, and traveled through a low-band auxiliary line so old that most units didn't even monitor it anymore. But one man did, a major at Corps headquarters who had insomnia and habitually checked forgotten channels. He heard her message, froze, and repeated it to the operations floor. At 06:07, with the lead Allied tanks already inside the valley mouth, he issued a single command: all units, hold where you are. Across the valley, German artillery crews tightened their grips on firing lanyards. Convinced the Allies were already in the kill zone, they initiated the barrage. 172 guns thundered simultaneously, pounding an empty valley floor. Less than 90 seconds later, Allied armor would have been in their sights. The smoke plumes revealed every German battery position, giving Allied spotters exactly what they needed for counterfire. For the first time in the campaign, the Germans lost the element of surprise. And for the first time that morning, the Allied Corps had a chance to live. You tell me, do you believe a single silent gap in a single radio signal, less than 1 second long, could save over 38,000 men? If you do, type the number 7 in the comments. If that sounds impossible, hit the like button. The real story was only beginning. She had never planned to be anywhere near a battlefield. Born on a 42-acre farm outside St. Lo, the loudest sound on most days was the wind or a loose barn shutter. Her world was fence posts, milk pails, and engine oil from her father's battered tractor. But what set her apart was what she built at 12. A radio from a cracked cigar box, scrap copper wire, and 2 bolts from an old butter churn. It barely worked, but it was the start of the talent that would one day save an entire corps. By 13, she could hear variations in Morse rhythm the way other children heard bird songs. When rain approached, she knew it from static long before clouds darkened the sky. When Germans occupied the region, radio became illegal for civilians. Her father locked the cigar box in the attic. She rebuilt a new set from farm scrap and hid it inside a grain sack. Her mother scolded her. The Germans shot people for less. She answered stubbornly, "If I can hear them, they can't surprise us." When the Allies landed in Normandy in June 1944, her farm became a staging area. Trucks rolled past at all hours. Signal Corps detachments set up temporary posts in barns and abandoned mills. She watched them work, tracking spools of wire, metal clips, and tuning knobs. A corporal noticed and handed her headphones. "Try it," he said, expecting her to fumble. She didn't. She adjusted the gain, corrected drift, and matched overlapping frequencies by ear faster than instruments could. Within a week, she volunteered at a backup radio station, officially as a messenger assistant, unofficially as the operator. The others called when something sounded off. She was 17, barely a young woman, sitting beside men twice her age who underestimated her until she corrected operators on transmission timing or identified moving German signals by harmonic signatures. She wasn't trained or certified, but she was right every single time. Her notes filled 3 thick ledgers: timestamps, modulation, micro-pauses in enemy traffic, and oddities. No one else recorded this. It looked obsessive. It was obsessive. And it was the reason she recognized the 0.88-second anomaly the morning the Corps marched toward the valley. No manual taught her that. No commander briefed it. She learned by listening. Weather patterns in static, distant German patrols, Allied pilots shouting coordinates, and sometimes men in uniform dismissing her with a gentle smile. "Good job, but leave the serious work to us." She ignored them. Officers thought her helpful. Corporals thought she was lucky with radios. Only 1 or 2 understood that her ear was the best instrument in the building. No one knew she once tracked a German supply column for 18 minutes using the faint hum of a damaged generator. No one knew she could detect a nervous operator from the key pressure pattern. No one knew she studied radio manuals under a candle, while front lines crept closer every day. So when she heard that 0.88-second gap on the morning the Corps stepped into danger, it wasn't luck or guesswork. It was the culmination of 5 years of obsessive listening, born on a farm, sharpened under occupation, and finally pointed at the largest German ambush in the sector since 1940. And here is where the viewer decides. Could someone with no rank or training outdetect an entire Allied intelligence section? By 0512, fog over the bocage had thickened into a gray curtain. Allied scouts advancing ahead of the armored column could see no farther than 60 yards. Field radios crackled with routine check-ins. Nothing looked suspicious, yet 8 miles ahead, German artillery crews were loading their guns. Inside the radio shed, the girl pressed 2 fingers against the earpiece, jaw tightening. The anomaly pulsed again. 0.88 seconds of silence between characters on a German encrypted transmission. At first listen, it could pass for static, but static changes with weather, not timing. She checked her stopwatch again. Same measurement. The tiny detail wouldn't leave her alone. She opened ledger book number 3 and traced a column of notes from 12 weeks earlier. There she found a nearly identical pattern from a previous ambush that killed 2,136 Canadians in under 4 hours. Her pulse quickened. She compared pitch signatures, drift values, and sideband noise. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Mobile transmitters, not stationary. German units on the move, multiple units. She ran a second comparison. Harmonic wobble consistent with half-track mounted generators. That meant armor, engines, fuel clouds, steel tracks, and turrets loaded with high-velocity shells. She pulled off her headphones, wiped her palms on her skirt, and walked straight to the operations desk. A lieutenant, exhausted from a 14-hour shift, skimmed her report and exhaled sharply. "It's moisture," he said, "atmospheric scatter. This valley traps humidity." She pushed the report back. "Humidity doesn't change timing." He gave a tired smile. Scout saw nothing. "The valley's clear," she didn't argue. She returned to her station and replayed the tape, isolating the second signal buried under the main traffic. Her ear caught a faint metallic resonance. She leaned closer. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, one ring every 3.2 seconds. She checked her notes. That ring came from a German panzer engineer company using a generator with a cracked flywheel, units that set up artillery traps. Presence of the engineer company meant one thing. Germans were preparing an artillery trap. Engineer units never traveled alone. They set up firing lanes, marked coordinates, and laid cable networks for synchronized barrages. This company had been at 2 previous ambushes, both massacres. She felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. The Allied Corps, 38,000 soldiers, was less than 90 minutes from the valley. At marching speed of 2.7 mph, the lead battalion would enter the kill zone shortly after 06 hour. If the Germans repeated their tactic, the entire 1st Brigade would be trapped with no room to maneuver. She returned to the lieutenant again. This time she didn't ask, she insisted. "The Germans are setting an ambush. Their engineer company is active. They're using the same timing pattern as before." He sighed, motioned to a sergeant. "Verify the logs." The sergeant compared her notes with operational maps. She pointed to the valley, the German signal timestamps, the harmonic frequencies. The sergeant hesitated. "Sir, she might have a point." But the lieutenant shook his head. "No visual confirmation. Scouts saw nothing. We can't halt a corps on a volunteer's word." She walked back to her station, breath shaking. The fog that blinded Allied scouts also blinded German observers. Fog meant they could reposition without being spotted. Fog meant perfect cover. Fog meant the exact conditions under which Germans love to execute artillery traps. She rewound the tape again and heard it. The unmistakable sequencing of fire control pulses. 3 pulses, pause. 3 pulses, pause. The coded pattern German artillery officers used before synchronizing battery alignment. Last time she heard it, Canadians were obliterated at the valley floor. Her hands trembled. She checked the Allied troop movement schedule. The 3rd Armored Brigade would reach the valley mouth at 6:07. Germans were likely planning to fire at 06:09. Soldiers would have barely 2 minutes inside the zone. Enough time for the entire vanguard to be trapped with no escape. She imagined what would happen if she stayed silent. Infantry pinned under steel, tanks immobilized, wounded men screaming while German batteries reloaded efficiently. She had read the after-action reports, memorized every detail of the previous ambush. This was the same pattern, same German units, same trap. Only this time the victims weren't 2,000, they were nearly 40,000. No one else could hear the warning, understand the anomaly, or even know to look. This was the moment she had to decide. Remain a silent volunteer or act on instinct, violate protocol, and stop a massacre before it happened. Before we continue, I want your judgment. Should she break protocol and act? If yes, type the number 7. If you think she should stay in her role and follow orders, tap the like button. Your answer shows where you stand in this story. The shed was silent except for the soft ticking of the field clock. It's 06:04, 3 minutes until the first Allied tanks reached the valley mouth. 3 minutes until 38,000 men walked blind into 172 German guns. 3 minutes until everything she heard became either a footnote or the difference between life and death. She stared at the transmitter key. Regulations forbade volunteers from sending priority alerts, overriding chain of command, or broadcasting unsanctioned signals. But none of those rules mattered. Not with the engineer pulse sequence echoing, the cracked flywheel confirming the lethal company, and the harmonic drift proving readiness. She tightened the strap of her headphones until they pressed hard against her skull. She needed to be absolutely sure before crossing the line. She replayed the tape at half speed. Static roared, hiss crawled. The signal came through again. Timing, pulses wobble. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Germans were ready. The guns were loaded. The kill zone was primed. She inhaled sharply. Then she did the forbidden thing. She reached for the transmitter. The key felt cold in her hand. Her thumb shook slightly, then steadied. She adjusted the gain, retuned down half a kHz and shifted to auxiliary line 3, the almost forgotten channel. If she sent the message on a main frequency, German intercept teams would catch it. On auxiliary 3, they wouldn't. Static from the morning storm masked most of the outbound signal. She pressed the key. The transmitter hummed to life with a soft rising whine. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated. Not from fear, but because she understood exactly what this meant. If she was wrong, she had falsified a priority alert, endangering the operation. If she was right, she was about to stop the largest artillery ambush in the region that day. She began transmitting a sequence. 31 characters, short enough to evade German direction finding, precise enough for Allied headquarters to recognize as a warning, and fast enough to slip through fog interference. 11 seconds, the length of a deep breath, a match burning down, a life-changing decision. At 6:05:14, the message left the shed. At 06:05:15, it hit a repeater tower 4 miles away. At 06:05:16, it bounced into the low-band receiver at Corps headquarters. Most operators ignored it. Auxiliary 3 rarely carried anything important, but one man didn't. Major Stephen Hellbrook, a 41-year-old former telegraph engineer with insomnia, caught the signal out of instinct. He froze mid-sip of coffee, replayed it, narrowed his eyes, and replayed it again. 31 characters. A timing code he recognized. A warning embedded in the message structure. He stood up, chair slamming into the wall. "Who sent that?" he barked. No one knew. He didn't care. He grabbed the field mic and shouted 3 words that detonated across every Allied radio within 20 miles. "All units hold." At 06:12, engines squealed as lead Sherman tanks halted just outside the valley. Infantry officers shouted orders. Truck drivers slammed brakes. Artillery spotters on ridges snapped to attention. Confusion rippled through the ranks. At 06:06:50, the girl listened to Allied traffic and felt her stomach drop. If she was wrong, she had frozen 38,000 men based on instinct alone. The weight pressed down like a stone. At 06:07:11, the lead Sherman tank C-22 rolled forward 3 feet, its treads crunching gravel. The commander leaned out to shout. He never finished the sentence. At 06:07:18, the Germans opened fire. 172 guns erupted at once. The valley exploded in white flashes. Shockwaves rolled like thunder down the corridor. If tanks had moved another 40 yards, they'd have been in the exact center of the target grid.